Yar, mateys, it be more Treasure Island review for your test on Friday. This be your captain speaking, and we're gonna be here talking about parts 3 and 4 of Treasure Island. Part 3 is my shore adventure, in which Jim, having now found out the pirates were going to mutiny from Israel Hands Abraham Gray and Long John Silver talking while he hid in an apple barrel, and having alerted the captain and the doctor and the squire to their nefarious purposes, he decides that, if there's more pirates left on this boat in that first chapter of this part, that maybe it's safer to be on the island. Not your brightest idea, Jim, but just because Jim's made a mistake, they all happen to work out. Jim gets very lucky over the course of this here novel. The moment Jim makes it ashore and he realizes he's with a bunch of pirates, he books it straight into the jungle, hoping to avoid trouble, and that he does. But then he sees Long John Silver having a talk with an honest hand. And, he's thinking to himself, well, maybe, just maybe there's more honest than dishonest hands, and things will work out here. Oh, Jimmy, Jim. You've made a mistake. Because we get another Tom. You'll note we have Tom Redruth, who is a character. We have Tom Morgan, who is a character. And we have this Tom. There are 3 characters named Tom in this here novel. Tom, however, says, Long John Silver, I won't join you. And he turns his back because it's his duty as an Englishman to, be honorable and true. Well, Long John Silver don't like that none. So the moment Tom turns his back after hearing another honest hand shot down by pirates, murdered in cold blood, Long John Silver takes his crutch, throws it from under his arm, hitting Tom in the back, and Jim hears the snap of his back breaking from the impact. Long John Silver then grabs onto a tree, launches himself over, tackles him on top of poor Tom, who's very defenseless, takes out a dagger, and he stabs him twice to finish him off. Long John Silver murders a man in cold blood, and Jim sees this. Jim then decides, you know what? This is not a good place to be, and starts to run further onto the island. And Jim, having now run to the island, faces his fears because he hears movement around him, and he sees something moving out of the corner of his eyes, and he's afraid. Of course, he remembers he brought a gun with him, and so he's thinking, well, maybe I don't need to be too afraid. But this is where he meets Ben Gunn, who claims, oh my goodness, I'm another person, finally, I'm saved, I'm a good person, I swear, I'll never drink, I will never drink, I've given up alcohol, I'm a good person, I pray, I say my prayers, and I'll make you rich if you can just get me off this island. Do you have any cheese? Ben Gunn is a little mad, but he reveals that he's already got the treasure. And that all he would like is some cheese and a passage to England. And Jim thinks, well, I bet the squire would go for that. And so he makes a deal with Ben Gunn. Not long thereafter, they begin making their way with a plan to attack the pirates, and they see the Union Jack over the stockade on the island, a fort built by Flint and his men. And the Union Jack, for those of you who don't know, is the flag of Great Britain, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, as well as any other parts of United Kingdom territory that I may have forgotten or not know so well, like the Isle of Man. And he realizes that there's a battle going on, but a cannonball comes by, and he and Ben Gunn are separated at this point. The narrative then switches over to the Doctor for 3 chapters. And we did not read those 3 chapters as a class, so they're not things you need to know on your test, other than that it's how they got to this, the Honest Hands got to the stockade fight goes on, and how, alas, Tom Redruth dies. We've got 2 dead Toms over the course of this novel. Jim makes his way to the stockade and lets people know about Ben Gunn, but there's another battle set up very quickly. But before that battle happens, Long John Silver, pulling a Dr. Strange, shows up and says, I've come to bargain. The captain refuses bargain, and everyone's quite rude to Long John, probably because he's a murdering psychopath of a pirate who betrayed them for treasure and would have no problem murdering them if he could. As such, there's another attack of the pirates, and on this, Hunter, another one of the minor characters, meets his end as he is hit over the head with a musket and clubbed. That said, Abraham Gray had switched sides and gone back to the Honest Hands, realizing that, you know what? I don't want to be a murderer. That seems like a bad thing. Good on you, Abraham Gray. You've got a good head on your shoulders. The battle rages on, and the pirates start to climb over the stockade in their efforts for the map. And Jim's draws his sword like, yeah, I'm ready to fight. And he comes face to face with Job Anderson. And Jim freezes like, oh, The decisions I have made leading up to this point have been less than optimal. But he's saved by Abraham Gray, who stabs Job Anderson in the chest. He's lucky and saved there. And they're eventually run off, and they do an inventory of the battle. And they realize, oh, things look pretty grim here. Because, oh dear, the captain's wounded. The squire may have been gunning people down. But, it's 7-19 in terms of honest hands versus mutineers at that point. There's still a few of the honest hands alive who haven't quite bit the bucket yet. However, Jim, viewing the situation as dire, rather than keep guard, as the captain told him, as the captain is wounded in both the lung and the shoulder by musket balls, he decides that he's going to go off on the island and steal the Hispaniola by himself. Another fantastic idea, and this is into part 4, my sea adventure. So Jim has now left the shore, he's gone back to sea. And we've gone through the stockade also, which was a part of this. But as Jim goes to sea, this is on to part 5. You know what, we can make this a long review video. We've got time. We're not going anywhere. So Jim, after his conversations with Ben Gunn, remembered that Ben Gunn had a boat. And while the doctor has gone off to see Ben Gunn, bringing some Parmesan cheese with him to fulfill Ben Gunn's greatest desire of cheese, Jim realizes, well, wait a second. As far as healthy people go, it's the Squire, Abraham Gray, and me. If the pirates attack, we have no way to defend them. But if I go take the Hispaniola, we've got a bargaining piece. So rather than doing his job, Jim wanders off. Oh, Jim. Jimmy Jim, 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 Jimmy Jim, Jim. Oh, Jimmy, leaving everyone alone. That could have turned out real bad. But Jim goes and he finds Ben Gunn's coracle, and he learns he's not very good at steering a boat by himself. It takes him a long time. He spends a night in the boat getting tossed about in the shore, making his way to the Hispaniola. He hears shouting and sees fighting on the Hispaniola as he passes by it. And eventually, after about a day of this, and we fell asleep on the boat, he gets off onto the Hispaniola, and the Hispaniola runs over the coracle, so he has no way to get off the Hispaniola and back to shore unless he can take charge of it. And while he's there, he sees one of the 2 pirates is dead, and that be Mr. O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien is no more. Alas, Miles O'Brien, we hardly knew ye. And it's true, we don't. He has no character development whatsoever. He's an extraordinarily flat character, characterized by direct characterization. For those of you who've been studying your literary terms, you'll know what that means. If you don't, you'll probably need to go back and study that some more, mateys. But Jim sees Israel Hands drunk on the deck, a slobbering drunk. He's got empty bottles rolling all over the place, and Jim tries to wake him up, and the first thing he asks for is something to drink. Jim obliges this. He then lets Israel Hands know, you'll call me Captain Hawkins from now on. I'm in charge. Well, Jim, you may think you're in charge, but good effort. That said, Israel Hands is willing to make this deal if Jim brings him food and stuff, and Jim wanders around the ship seeing how trashed it absolutely is. And Israel Hands gives him instructions on how to sail the ship and move it around. He then says, Jim, I need something to drink that's not this rum. It's too strong. I'm drunk. It would be bad for me. And Jim says, well, what do you want me to get you? And he says, I don't care as long as it's strong. So he can't lie consistently. Israel Hands also makes up his own contractions. He says mottant, a combination of might and not to make mottant. Ugh, what an abomination of a contraction. What a terrible instance of poor grammar. He also uses a lot of double negatives in his speaking. He's not a man who would be passing Mr. Kravitz's class like I know all of you are. But when Jim goes, he suspects something, so he takes a peek up on deck while he's supposed to be getting the port for him, which is a type of fortified wine. And then Jim peers over and he sees Israel Hands is taking a knife. And he's taking that knife and hiding it in his shirt, so that he can probably try and murder Jim later. And Jim brings it back, and as he sails it back, following Israel Hands' instructions, he gets excited and he forgets about the fact that he's got a knife-wielding, murdering pirate on board. Well, Jim, that was a mistake, because Israel Hands is coming at him. And Jim gets lucky as he realizes someone's sneaking up on him. And there's a chase. He pulls his guns on Israel Hands, but the powder be wet. He spent a whole night in a boat on the water, and he didn't think to check his guns and make sure they were properly loaded and primed. Well, they weren't, and that means that Israel Hands is chasing him. But the boat hits a sandbar, which saves Jim's life as Israel Hands was about to stab him. They run around the mast some before Jim starts climbing up. Israel Hands putting his knife in his mouth so he can do the full two-handed climb after Jim. Jim at the top of the mast. He quickly works and he makes an extraordinary effort to load and prime his pistols. And Israel Hands is up there and he's like, I've got you now, Israel Hands. And Israel Hands is there with his knife in hand and he has to buffer a little bit. Remember, Israel Hands is not the brightest of fellows. But Israel Hands is like, well, it looks like you've got me. And Jim's like, yeah, I got him. I'm so good. And Israel Hands throws his knife. And with that, both pistols discharge. And Israel Hands goes plummeting into the sea. And Jim feels something sharp into his shoulder. And that's where part 5 ends. And we'll do our review of part 6, Captain Silver, for you tomorrow, 6th grade. Take care, me hearties. And I will see you in the next one.